Welcome to International Schools Podcast. I'm your co-host, John Mickton. Dan Taylor is away today. One of the things that I think all of us that are in international schools, and this podcast over the last few years has really focused on international schools, educators, entrepreneurs, leaders, and kind of anything that really touches in the topic. But one thing is that there are many international school educators that have their own children going to international schools. So you have a couple generations, and that's really interesting. And then, maybe a percentage become educators themselves and international school educators. And I know for the case of my two children who went through international schools all their life, they are not international school educators and they had no plans to become. But that could be very different in different contexts. And today is kind of unique because our two guests are children of international school educators, and they themselves have their children in international schools. And what makes it even more interesting, it's all within the same school over a span, I'm going to say, of maybe 30, 40 years, which is just very unique. And that's something else. International schools, often there's this high transition. People come and go. They're on the circuit. They do 2, 3 years or 5 years. But there are international schools around the world where people do settle down, especially if they have families or they like the environment or it's really conducive to their professional growth, and they will stay a long time. And different schools have different lifespans of their educators. And that's, I think, in itself something that's really interesting. There's no doubt there are a few international schools that are turning 100, and there are other international schools that are not older than a year. So we really have kind of the gamut of different ages of international schools. But today we have really the privilege and honor to having two educators from the International School of Geneva, which is part of the Ecolant Foundation in Geneva, Switzerland. And Stefan and Matt, both educators, are children of international school educators and parents of students in the International School at Ecolant. So Matt and Stefan, a warm welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Hi, thanks.
So maybe let's just start off with, as we always do, just a quick little bio, Stefan, and then Matt, just kind of give us a context of who you are, what you're teaching, and then we'll kind of dig into some of the dynamics of being children of international school educators and parents of.
Okay, hi, I'm Stef. I'm a singer, songwriter, performer, teacher, author, and above everything, I'm a big believer in these international schools. So I've been a teacher at La Tenere for about 14 years now, under many guises: language teacher, English, French, music, drama. But my current role is my passion in teaching, and that's outdoor learning and forest school education. And like John said, I've been at the school. I was probably conceived at the school, which we probably shouldn't talk about that. So for a long time, and I think that's about it. I think Matt should take over now.
Yeah, sure. So hi, I'm Matt Welling, and much like Stef, I think I was probably also conceived at the school, if I'm honest. My parents met at the school a while ago, some 4 years. They were teaching geography and English at the time. And so I went to the school as well. So I'm an alumnus, I graduated in 2001. And then after having done a roundabout journey, like enjoying different, avenues, I studied chemistry a lot. I came back as a chemistry teacher. And currently right now at La Chat, I'm teaching chemistry at the IB. But I'm also head of the Theory of Knowledge department, which is, I guess, my passion in education. So I guess making sure that students are aware of critical thinking, but aware of perspectives, aware of, let's say, grey questions where it's not always easy. The world out there is not black and white. Obviously, my son's at school at La Tenere as well. My daughter, who just turned 1, is signed up to go to the school in a couple of years' time when she's old enough. So on the side, obviously, like Stef, I'm a musician, a performer, and we've been playing music for a while together. So at the moment, it's my main outfit. I have a few friends who I met in school, actually, back in the days. We're still in a band. We're very much a dad's band now. We play once a month, but the 4 of us are still recording, still playing, not performing as such, but just finding that space and that time. So there's some continuity there as well.
Fantastic. I'm going to ask you guys when you speak to come closer to your computer mic, if you don't mind. Thank you. Yeah. So one of the things that I'd be curious, both of your families, your parents are both educators, and they were both at the same campus that you are currently, which is really interesting. And that's campus École Inde International School of Geneva, I think dates back to 1924, but that campus may be in their late 70s. And so École Inde has four campuses across the Geneva region, and this one that you both are is in another state called the Canton de Vaud, and is a pre-K through 12 school. Stefan, so as you were being brought up in that environment, what were some of the things that kind of resonated with you as a child, as an adolescent? Because often, many children often don't follow the paths of their parents. Usually you want to go and break away and do your own thing. What was something, as you grew up and you watched your parents interact and you interacted, maybe your siblings in that environment, what kind of resonated for you that really stuck with you to this day?
I think that's a great question, John. I think as I get older and I reflect back, I start to see the things now. Because at the time, I have this funny story of, like, I was driving my kid home one day, and she said to me, Daddy, do I have to be a teacher at La Chataigneraie as well? And I said, no, sweetie, you don't. Your grandpa was, grandma was, mommy is. And it was that sort of reflection. I had that same reflection at her age. But as I get older, I think the biggest thing that sticks with me is community. Is the fact that the community that's created at our school, and I'm sure at lots of international schools, there's something that sticks with you for the rest of your life. I still have, like Matt was just saying, he has friends that he still plays in a band with, that he graduated with. I still hang out with my friends that I was in primary school with now, and I'm 47. And it's this great feeling of community. And we didn't say it before, but our parents were friends at school and still are friends now. And this goes on and goes on. And it's something that's not just reflected in Matt and I, but in our friends as well. They love the fact of coming back and visiting and keeping in touch. And I think that's the biggest thing for me that I've taken away from being a student, being a teacher, being a parent, is this great sense of community that we have in our school. And I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure it happens in a lot of international schools, this community feeling.
So Matt, you, I know, had gone abroad and taught in another international school before coming back to La Chataigneraie. Would you say there's something about the structure or the culture that's unique to La Chataigneraie, maybe that you didn't see in another school? And I think, if I'm right, you were in Thailand, and maybe it was a circuit school. There's this, we love labels as human beings, but one of them is people are called, oh, you're on the circuit. That means periodically you'll go to new schools, usually for professional reasons, or maybe you want to become a leader, or you're looking to reinvent yourself in a different area of the curriculum. Now, what about your impression, having gone out on the circuit and then come back? Did you notice something different?
Yeah, I mean, wow, what a question if I think about it. Just to give the listeners a bit more context, I've been teaching at the International School of Geneva for about 5-6 years. And I took a sabbatical and then taught for a year in the Seychelles, in the International School in the Seychelles, with 150 students on a small island which was 14 kilometers long. We delivered the IGCSE and the A-level curriculum. And then I moved to Thailand and I taught in a small international school embedded in a large Thai school. And we taught again the IGCSE and the A-level curriculum. And so then I came back after 2 years for quite a lot of reasons, and not just from the structure of the school, but from other certain privileges that I wanted to make sure that I had for my kids. Clean air would be one of them, let's say. It's really simple. But when I think about it, the thing that stood to me most, and again, each school had something really special about it, but was kind of the educational experience that students received was something else. And to give you a brief example, we have a speaker series happening at La Chataigneraie and on the other campuses. So this is John Deegan, who gets different speakers in. So I just saw Alistair Campbell a couple of weeks ago speak. And I was just thinking how in the other schools I went to, something like that just didn't happen. So this above and beyond the curriculum, this, hey, how do we show you what life is and how do we prepare you for life and help you move forwards? I mean, Alistair Campbell came to speak as a politician, but also an advocate for mental health. So it wasn't just about, so how do you go make your way in the world later, but it was like, how are we more aware of the bigger issues, the bigger social justice issues of the world? And I feel that is just one of probably many examples which I felt the school at Ekelund was offering students, which I didn't see in other schools. And I'm not saying the other schools were doing their students a disservice, just that was something that really stood out to me.
So you grew up through the school, your parents were teachers. Anything that were there moments where you're like, I am not doing this? This doesn't look like something I want to. I mean, because now you're both educators, but were there moments where you're thinking, you know, my passion is something else? Thank you, Mom and Dad, for this great experience. I'm moving on. Or I'm just curious, Stefan, did you go through that?
Oh, very much so. I mean, I thought being a teacher for many, many, many years. In fact, I tried so hard that I became a professional musician, as far away as you can from teaching. But even when I became a musician, I then ended up teaching music, and then through teaching music, I got into teaching, and then I was lucky enough to get hired at La Châtaigneraie, and so it was one of those things that I don't know if you could say that a teacher has a calling, but I fought it for a long time. I did really fight it for a long time. But then once I understood, what it was and the idea behind it, I've embraced becoming a teacher with my whole heart. I love it. I love it, and I thank my parents for being so patient with me.
which is great. I know, so a great model for you as you have your own children going through this experience. Matt, you grew up in your parents were teaching, you grew up in the area, you're teaching in the area. How is it with the local community and feeling integrated? Because you're in Switzerland and, you of course speak the local language, you live in the local community, you have a lot of history of the local community. Do you think there's always a bit of a disconnect as an expatriate, even though you might have spent all your childhood and now adulthood in the same place? And how do you see that with your own children, maybe?
Again, that question makes me reflect so much on different aspects of my life. So, people ask me where you're from. I'm like, well, that's a tough one. Like, what do you mean where I'm from? Is it my blood, my passport, some really basic things? Or is it which culture that I affect and which culture affects me? And I'd say that the strongest ties I have with Switzerland and its local community is how I affect its culture by being a musician, or how its culture affects me in different ways. But individual ties with, let's say, local people, I'll be honest, that's one of the things I think I lack a bit. And one of the conversations I'm having with my partner at the moment is, do we want to have our kids maybe spend more time in even the local schooling system? So I know my daughter is signed up to go to Ekelund, but we're having a discussion like maybe we'd like her to go to the local system to help us integrate further, because we recognize that's maybe something which at the moment we're very much in. I don't want to use the word bubble as such, but in our communities which are already established. And so those links are hard to come by. I mean, when I was younger, I used to play rugby with the local teams in Geneva, and that was my main link. But now I don't really do that. I mean, I see Stef every week, but we work in the same place.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And Stefan, I know you had mentioned that your parents are still in Switzerland. Is that correct?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so they've made Switzerland home. What about their journey, as Matt was sharing so nicely about his perspective? Do you think they've integrated, or is how is that long term?
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, a very good question. My parents arrived in Switzerland in about 1971, 1972. So they've been here 50 years, 50 odd years. And I think that's one of those things that they came at a time of our school, which was super vibrant. The staff was super young, and they were kind of bringing this new era of education in. But I don't think they ever thought at the time that this is where they would end up and they would be here forever. But then kind of 30 years flash by and you think, okay. And they did this sort of move in the late 80s. Late 80s. My dad said, now we're going to go back to the UK because we have to start thinking about retirement, and this is it. And he got a job as a research fellow at the University of York. And we got there, and I can remember it. I can remember it crystal clear. After about 2 months of being in the UK, he walked through the door. He said, "That's it. We're going back home." And that clicked in my head, because that was I think the first realization for my parents that home was Switzerland. And so we came back, and then that's it. We stayed here. My parents, the whole family's become Swiss. The integration side for my family was what I would call very immersive, because we didn't do anything extracurricular through school. We did all our sports and all our music and all our creative stuff in the community. And so I think my parents realized sort of the late 80s that this is where they were going to stay. They feel Swiss, and they're still here. They live they live 10 minutes away from me in their little farm village. And my dad's still very much involved with the IB, with his theater. My mom walks her dogs. So they've kind of they've done it where they kind of had this notion of coming here, doing something revolutionary, and then going back to where they thought they should be. And in fact, in the end of the day, the revolution happened and they stayed here. And this is where they feel most at home and where they sort of see themselves, I think.
That's so interesting. And Matt, what about your children? I know they're younger, but do you think they are seeing Switzerland as home? I assume you're from the UK. How are you playing that with your own kids? Because you've been here long term, and are your parents still in Switzerland?
Yeah, both my father lives in Switzerland. He lives, like Stef's parents, 10 minutes away from me. It's great. My mother moved down towards south of France maybe 10 years ago. So I see her a bit less regularly. But I mean, just in that sense as well, I mean, if your parents became Swiss, my extended family is Swiss. And I'm embarrassed to say this, I'm the only person without a Swiss passport. Both my kids, my son and my daughter, have exclusively a Swiss passport. They don't have a British passport, they're Swiss. And I think for them, I mean, definitely my daughter, Juno, home is going to be Switzerland. She was born in Switzerland, she's raised here. Sky, obviously, he spent some time in Seychelles and in Thailand. He used to tell people he's from Thailand. That's going to change after a while, I expect. He gets a bit old. He's just turning 7 next year. So I think for them, it's going to be home without a doubt. I don't see us moving anywhere else. I mean, I came back here because I felt as if Switzerland molded me. And as a result, that's where, surprisingly enough, I felt like I fit in best. So for me, it's home.
How do you guys deal with in the school community that you work in? Of course, there are people that are circuit people that come and go, and there are other people that may be midterm, long term. How does that work for you when you've been in the same school, your parents have been, and you interact with somebody who says, "Oh, I worked in this place, or I worked in that place." What kind of feelings do you get, or do you ever get like, "Oh, maybe I should do that," or it's more kind of a sidebar interest?
I think it's, I don't know what Matt feels about, but I feel that when you grow up in this kind of environment, you learn how to trust quickly, you learn how to make friends quickly, and you also learn how to move on quickly. And so when you meet people who you call like on the circuit thing, you have these great relationships for a little while, and then maybe they go off and they continue their adventure. But it doesn't make me feel in my head like, oh gosh, I want to go and do that. I feel great pride in the, I mean, I say it to a lot of people. I feel great pride in the fact that I've known the school since its developmental stages, and I've been a part of that developmental stages. So I don't have this yearning to go and see other places. I fulfill my sort of yearnings with my projects, shall we say, like my writing and my music, and just I think it's one of those weird things where I think when you feel good somewhere, you just feel good somewhere, and you don't need to find the grass is not always greener on the other side. It's
Absolutely. That's so true. Matt, do you think that maybe your children will become educators? They're really young, but if you were a betting man.
But I'm not sure. My son doesn't necessarily seem to be going down that track at the moment. He's going to be an engineer of sorts. He likes to create things a lot. He loves being outside. And my little girl, I'm not sure yet. I mean, just to go back to like a previous question you asked, I didn't know I was going to be an educator, to be honest. And I thought Stef summed it up really well. It's only with hindsight that I start realizing things. I'll be honest, I went through a lot of my youth up until at least 30, but not really being self-aware enough. I finished school. I went on to tertiary education. Then I got my PhD, and I didn't even know what I was doing. But I realized that every time I was teaching or involved in teaching, I was happiest and maybe at my best. And bit by bit, I became more aware of that. And so I'm hoping that for my kids, if they want to do that, they do, or if they just find out what makes them happy, then I'll support them with that journey.
Yeah. Steph, what about your children? Because as I remember, they're much older, right? And they're very likely now starting to think about tertiary education and next steps.
We're right in the mix now. So I have twins that are doing their IB now. They're in year 13. So a lot of discussions about what you want to be in life. And I mean, I think I can hear my parents speaking when I speak to them in the sense that, wow, you're so good with kids. You know, you're really good, you're comfortable. And I can hear their reply is my reply, which is, no, I don't want to do that. But I could see, you know, both my eldest have very, very, very different passions. So my daughter's very sporty and she wants to go into sports studies. And my son is an arty, so he wants to go into art things. And I would say that if they would go back to teaching, it will be like a journey similar to what maybe I've lived, which is to go and do other projects first, and then maybe realize through experience that, you know, actually this is something that I enjoy doing and it's something that I could do day to day. But at the moment, you know, I cracked a joke at the start of the podcast about it was actually my eldest daughter who's finishing now, and I just remember it crystal clear. You know, Daddy, do I have to be a teacher, Lasha? No, sweetie, you can do whatever you want. You know, Grandma was there, Grandpa was there, but you know, you don't have to do that. So, I mean, I wouldn't like to cast a vote, but I think it would be one of those things of maybe potentially in, you know, 10, 15, 20 years, maybe they'll decide to go into some sort of education, maybe not teaching, but some sort of education, passing on knowledge type thing.
That's interesting.
So you say passing on knowledge. It's interesting. I wonder in 15 years what education will look like. Actually, in some ways, you know, just looking at
a whole different podcast.
Yeah, no, but I think, Matt, you have a really good point. Is, you know, what will it look like and will the context? I have a feeling, my personal opinion is that when Stefan's parents were teachers, the chances of that repeating within our generation is much higher than maybe now. I think, you know, I'm just thinking with all this artificial intelligence and personalized learning and kind of the dilution of physical space to many different spaces, it might look so. Stefan, I think, you know, what you say is interesting, is that they might not be teachers, but maybe they'll be in education, because that might look very different in the context that we are. I assume both your partners are teachers too?
Mine is, his isn't.
Okay.
No, the computers. Yeah, she's a computer.
So, and did you meet at the school, Stefan?
So yes, if
like
you
your parents.
if you want to continue the sort of slush puppy type stuff, it was a gaze across the staff room to everything that has followed years later. So yes, yeah, my wife Jen, yeah, we met at school, not at school as students, but as teachers, and she's actually the vice principal at the school that we work at. So
she's your boss.
She's it gets even, if we start, it's even worse. Yeah, so that was a long time ago now, but yeah, cool. So we've kind of grown together and through the school as well together as the school's developed, because it's obviously changed a lot since when we first arrived together teaching at the same school. So.
Well, so just the numbers, how large it's gotten. So right. Matt and Stefan, you talked about your friends. You both referred to friends that were going to your school, International School of Geneva, La Chataigneraie campus. And are they educators too? Is there kind of like a community? Is there, I mean, and over the whole foundation, or is it just the campus that you're on?
So to keep the fairy story going, actually, two of my colleagues that I work with at school are two people that I was at primary school with in the same class. So yes, we have stuck around, and I think was it 2 or 3 in the secondary that were in my year as well, and you've got the same as well.
Yeah, I mean, I sat next to one of Stef's colleagues in primary school. And actually, when I think about it, some of my friends who are in the band I was speaking about, their kids also attend the Chataigneraie at the moment.
Wow, that's so interesting
as well. So we teach our friends' children.
Interesting.
It's very strange. It's quite hard.
It is. But you know, one thing that really resonated at the beginning, you both kind of talked about your passion for education, and that it really transcended the situation or the fact that your parents were there. You both really have expressed that. Is that what's driving you? It doesn't matter that you're La Chaternay. Do you think that's the kind of the thing that really keeps you going, is this passion? Okay, you're in Switzerland, it's very nice, you're in a campus, your parents were there, but is it the passion for you that really is the driver? Because we're going to talk about your other passion too, so it'll be interesting.
I think the passion for me has slowly developed. I went into teaching. I was very lucky. I started as a classroom assistant and was a full-time class assistant and did my degree and my teaching practice whilst I was an assistant. So it slowly developed over time. And then I was given various different jobs that I thought I was passionate about, as in like language and music and performing arts. But it was through these other jobs that I've actually fallen onto the passionate part of my teaching that I'm doing now, which is I'm an Italianista at our school, and we're kind of loosely following this idea of Reggio Emilia, which is very child-centered teaching, project-based, and that for me is where my passion is. It's the outdoors, it's project-based teaching, it's learning with the kids, it's co-creating, it's differentiating, and so I think if you'd maybe talked to me 2 years ago, you might have sort of said, oh, maybe I might think about a sabbatical or something. Whereas now I've kind of tapped into this perfect role that has been, without sort of mentioning it, made for me. And now I'm like fully into that, and I have no sort of feelings of angst of like, oh, I've got to go try something new. I'm like totally into the job that I'm doing, and that is the passion that I get up at 5:30 every day to go to school, to prepare the kids in the forest and do all these wonderful things. And that passion is what keeps me going and keeps me going back to La Chataigneraie. I could do this job anywhere else, but I feel that this is what I am, like our parents before kind of created the ambiance and the community that our school lives on. I feel that this outdoor learning and forest school, this is what I'm giving to that initial project, and this is where it's going. And so I would feel a bit weird, so like, no, I'm going to go off to working in the international school in Japan or something, because this is what I think my calling is. This is what my legacy will be at the school, is this outdoor learning program.
And it's so nice to hear, Stefan, that you kind of had this journey as you were trying different roles in the education field that kind of developed and pointed you to where you are. Matt, is that kind of your story too? Well, how, you also expressed some passion, especially about theory of knowledge and, science. Yeah. What was your journey like and suddenly saying, okay, I'm going to stick to this?
Yeah, I think probably one of the first things that stuck with me was during my research, during my PhD, we have to teach as well as do research. And my colleagues would be like, oh, I've got to go deal with the first years now. Great. I'd rather do my research. And I was always like, hey, I'll do that. I'm more than happy to work with them. That'd be great. I'd love to. And actually, when I started EPFL in Switzerland, and I barely spoke French, but they got me teaching chemistry to first-year biologists. And I was roughly the same age as them. And I didn't speak any French, and they taught me French, and I taught them chemistry. And it sort of, from then, I kind of realized that it's something that worked well with me, and therefore I sort of developed the passion. Again, like I said, almost unconsciously as it moved forwards. And now, obviously, I realize, I say I'm a chemist, but for me, theory of knowledge is sort of the key part of the IB curriculum. In fact, when I was in Seychelles, I wrote a theory of knowledge course for the middle school and delivered it there. And I tried to embed my teaching of theory of knowledge in all the subjects I teach. And it's a core subject. It's like, it's how we develop and critique knowledge. So for me, it's definitely the highlight of my teaching days is epistemology, effectively.
And I think, as you say, you're describing it to us that it's in everything that you teach. And I think the theory of knowledge is so important, especially in the context where we have a lot of major ethical, creative tensions that we're juggling. And a lot of our students are facing a world that's quite challenging. So that's just so nice to hear that. Now, so we're talking about passion, but really, Matt's got his Iron Maiden shirt on and Stefan's got a guitar. Is that and so Oh, nice. So the fact is that is another passion. And of course, you're both working full time, you're parents, you have partners, you're really busy, and then you've got this music. And so tell us a bit about your passion for music, why, and how does that balance out with everything else that you have to do with your responsibilities? And maybe just start with Stefan and then over to Matt.
I mean, I think so. To put a sort of like little foundations, like Matt and I, we didn't actually meet when we were kids because I'm a bit older than Matt. So I met Matt maybe 8 years ago properly. I mean, I think I knew Matt when he was born. I shouldn't say that, but we met properly about 8 years ago when we started thinking about a project that we could do together. And I knew one of the great things about Matt is he's a multi-instrumentalist. He plays double bass, he plays all these different things. And I wanted to play with a double bassist. And I, through the grapevine, Matt Willing, he plays the double bass. Email, long story short, 8 years later, we're here now. But in that time, we played in three different projects together. And the project that we've got now, I think, is this culmination, much like the journey to teaching. The FLARESTAR project that we have now is the culmination of this 8-year journey that we've gone through together musically and creatively. And so how do we negotiate it? I think it's very fluid, it's very organic, we don't force it. If one of us doesn't feel like practicing, we don't practice. It's very laid back, but we're also kind of tapping into that very nice world of sort of teaching hours where, on a Wednesday evening, that's why we're looking a bit high now, is because we actually just had practice before because we have a concert on Saturday. High, obviously, creative high, nothing else.
It's an adult podcast. We're good.
So we make it happen because I think it's just organic. It's happening. We don't force things. And I think we've gone through other projects where it was very forced. We had to have a 2-hour practice on a Sunday morning and an hour practice on this day and that. Whereas this one, we just have Wednesdays. That's when we practice. And if we practice, we practice. If we don't, we don't. And it's okay. But we still rock on no matter what we do. I mean, and it's a very creative project. As in, like, we both play multiple instruments, and I think much like our outlook to the band, which is very organic, we kind of write our music to how the song wants to go. So if I'm going to play the mandolin and Matt wants to play the double bass, then we'll make a song around the mandolin and the double bass. If I want to play drum, Matt wants to play bass, I don't know, guitar, or even guitar, we'll try and write a song like that. So it's very organic. I think that's the word I want. I've said it 3 times. It's organic.
So you're describing this very fluid, organic, where there's no pressure. Matt, you have younger children, so of course, with younger children, there's often many more responsibilities and presences. So do you think this is part of the reason? Because of your situation, you're like, I want to be part of a project, but it has to be really organic, because you talk about being in other bands.
Yeah, right. Well, so as Steph was just chatting there, I was just thinking of a really sort of non-sexy version of why I think it works so well. And this is definitely from being a head of department. I've heard someone say, you never rise to your aspirations, you just fall to the level of your systems. And on just a purely practical note, Steph lives on the way home. We have a rehearsal room set up. We plug and play. I literally walk in, and within 5 minutes we're playing. We jam, and I walk out. And then we say, hey, see you next week, see you next time, what are we going to do? And as a result, I call it's time neutral. So then I get home, pick up my daughter from creche, and my son comes around, and it all fits in. So it's one of these things that the pragmatic side of it works so well. And Steph was saying that we've been in other bands where we had to drive 45 minutes in the morning to go and rehearse. It was tough. The whole morning would be gone. This slots in because it works as well. So there's this whole this technical side of things which just make it so much easier.
And you, which is interesting, you're a duo, so you're multi-instrumentalist, and you shared some of the instruments that you played. Is this something that you did on purpose, or is it just by coincidence?
No,
Matt, you want to tell us a bit?
it's an extremely focused objective. We had a project before called the Flocking Commemoration, and it was very good, very successful. Everybody had their role. I was the drummer, Matt was the bassist, Danny, our friend, was the guitarist singer, who also went to Eckland, and Mark, a fantastic slide guitar. But everybody had their role, and that was their role. When we kind of disbanded the Flocking Commemoration, Matt and I decided we wanted to continue playing together, because obviously drums and bass, you develop a connection. It's kind of sixth sense. You feel it. We feel each other. That didn't sound right. We stand with each other, and we decided then that when we were going to start a new project, that we were going to do exactly the opposite. There would be no rules, so that if one of us wants to play the guitar and one of us wants to play the drums, that's what we'll write the song for. That's how we're going to write the song. Or we have some songs where we work a lot with computers and samplers. So we have some songs which is basically guitar and computers and vocals, because we thought, well, we don't really want anything else on it. We just want to have that sound, a very electronic sound. So it's a very focused objective, but being very open whilst we do it. But there is very much this idea of we want to follow the music where the music wants to go. Not saying, oh, I'm a drummer, I'm just going to play drums, or I'm going to write the song. It's very focused in its objective, but very open in how we get to that objective.
And Matt, you mentioned that you were playing with other bands, and now you're focused on this. How's your transition like with Stefan? Why did you also gravitate to this model or this idea of this collaboration?
I mean, there's a whole long list of reasons. I was going to say, just on that note, one of the other like non-sexy pragmatic things is organizing 2 people is much easier than organizing 4 people and 5 people, and so it can always make it happen. No, exactly as Stef was saying, just the organicness of it means that you can express yourself freely. You can try things out. You can be a musician in lots of different ways. For example, I even try singing sometimes, which is for better or for worse. And as a result, we get a lot done. The other thing I do have to say is Stef is an amazing force for good in booking gigs and pushing the band forward and preparing the promo and all those things. Because we claim that I have small kids, and also that Stef is just driven like nobody else. And so one of the great things of working with Stef is that he just keeps the project flying like that.
And so how important is this for your well-being? Well-being is kind of the hip thing. Everybody talks about it. And obviously music, I mean, you're both, Matt, you're head of department, you teach chemistry, you teach TOK. Those are some, IB, those are some very demanding workflows. How does that work for you, Matt, in the sense of that gives you the balance and you find time, and then you have your family?
I think the best way to sum it up is usually at the end of every practice, the 2 things we tell each other is, that was awesome, I needed that. And pretty much it's like your lifeblood, your essence. I worked out maybe about 10 years ago that I'm not saying that I know what's good for me, but I know what I need. And I need friends and family, I need love, I usually need adventure in the mountains, but I need music. And if I go a week without music, I become a less good parent, I become a less good partner, and a less good teacher. And I realize it just regenerates me.
So that's interesting. So really your capacity to be a professional in the context as an educator is really dependent on your capacity to have that musical outlet.
Without a doubt.
Stefan, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there's not one day in my life since I was about 12 or 13 that I don't play music of some form, drums, guitar. Like Matt, if there's a time when I don't, then I'm affected by it. My mental health is affected by it. It's something that gives me joy, but it also something that helps me evacuate stress. It helps me take a world perspective. I mean, even just in the songwriting process, when we had our confinement due to COVID and everybody was at home, because in Switzerland you were allowed to have a duo. You were allowed to be 2 people in the same place.
Oh, you were okay.
So we carried on. So we wrote songs about COVID. We did online concerts so our fans could see us. So I think it would have been a very different experience. I think COVID and our in our context would have been a very different experience if we hadn't have had the band, because
Interesting.
we could see each other, we could feed off each other. We wrote songs which kind of evacuated all those feelings, and we shared those with people that were going through the same things as us. You know, people, we have fans, luckily, fans from all around the world that logged on in Canada, in Ukraine, in Scotland, and everywhere. So they could hear these songs about, you know, the feelings you're feeling, and the number of lovely messages we got back saying that's a beautiful song, thank you, makes me feel better. So I'm a great believer in the power of music, and you know, I think it was Bob Marley that said that music can save the world, and I am a firm believer that music can save the world.
I would only agree with you, absolutely. So as you guys are, teaching, being parents, and you've got this musical project, what is the priority? How do you prioritize things? So, many educators have different passions, and how are you prioritizing things, Matt? Do you literally have a piece of paper and you're like, okay, or is it more fluid because the music is what's going to feed everything else?
Yeah, again, I go back to my systems. I have systems in place which make sure, and the way I put it is, I know that if I want, but like, in the airplane, they tell you fit your own gas mask first before helping others. I try and go with that as much as possible. I make sure I prioritize time for music to make sure that then I can be better at everything else I do. So, for example, even tonight, right now, my partner's taking care of the 2 kids. And he's like, I get it, we'll do it. And so what will happen is I'll go back energized. And then on another day, I'll try and find a space to give her space. But that means that at the end of the day, we've enriched our lives. And I try and make sure that I try and play that game as much as possible.
So do you think, often, and I'm sure you see it yourselves in the context of your own school, a lot of teachers are very passionate and they tend to put in a lot of long hours. That's just the nature of the passion that educators have. Any thoughts, Stefan, or about what would you advise somebody, maybe they're not a musician, but kind of having both, being able to have this personal passion and also be personally engaged professionally and really passionate about the day work, in other words, being an educator?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those tricky questions, John. Like that. No, I personally, my own view, I believe to be a better teacher, you need to have something else that stimulates you, so that you can then take that back to the people you're working with, to the students you're working with. I think that if you kind of get this sort of tunnel vision in just your employment or your job, that you may be more prone to have like a burnout or get stressed about things. Whereas I also think on that side of things, that I think it's really important for your students to see that you have a passion, because especially within the IB framework, we're trying to sort of like build up these entities of thinkers, critical thinkers, and people that have many passions and want to have action on the world. And I think if they see us having what I consider our action on the world is our music, and we're contributing, we're putting statements out with our music, that our students will feel that, and then in turn they will do that, and maybe that will feed on to people in our school that have maybe thinking about having passions, and they can see that you can be passionate about your job, and you can be passionate about your passion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really resonates. I think that's quite powerful what you're saying, in the sense, if you're in a teaching situation, you're surrounded by students that are learning. If they see you with another passion, that's kind of a very powerful message. Matt, do you actually try to share that? Because you're working with older students and you're talking about theory of knowledge. How often does that permeate in your own teaching to highlight and amplify the importance of having this other passion on top of your professional passion?
Yes, well, I mean, I normally show my students our music videos. And I think Steph said it right. It's like, how would you inspire them? I think about, my son. What would I like my son to see? I'd like them to see somebody who does more than their work. And so to be an inspirational teacher, you don't have to teach, but then you also have to sort of embrace life as it is. And so what I want my students to realize is that at the end of the day, there's so many more things to life than your job, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. I normally say, like, hey, the thing I want you to do when you come out of my class is to be kind. Know how to work with people and be kind. If you learn some chemistry, it's a bonus. And just in response to something else you said earlier about, like, teachers put in a lot of hours, and I really appreciate that. And some of the things I've tried to work with my department is to be careful which metrics we use to measure good teaching or measure success, and say, like, you don't have to measure it by time. Maybe there's other ways of measuring it. So you might do some marking. You might build an exercise that might not take you very long, but it's so impactful, and so you don't need to spend 10 hours there. And so the take-home message I normally try and get from my team is, we need to be sustainable teachers. So at the end of the day, you don't want to work yourself into the ground, because you won't be a good teacher afterwards. You want to be an example to the students. Like, I want my students to see me, and sometimes, like, have you graded the test? And I say, no, I haven't. I was too busy doing nothing else, just messing around. And I want to set the example that you don't have to work every hour of your life, and it's okay to then go do something else and just be like, hey, I'm relaxed. Yeah, I didn't do it. I'm sorry. That's what it was. And obviously, there's like a balance there with being professional, but I feel like the message obviously is one about having more of a holistic life, and that's what I hope we impart to them. I've realized that students, the IBs are very, very, very demanding, and I worry that students then go into the world expecting that to be the default. That's how hard you should work for the system, so to speak, and hoping that you get a good perspective on that.
And I think your point's a very important one. The IBs really grueling, and also are the AP and the IGCSE and A levels. And it's so interesting you're bringing this idea of talking to your team about the thought that it's not about the long hours, it's how smart we work, how meaningful and how purposeful we are. And we just a couple weeks ago had Dr. Helen Kelly, who's a specialist on burnout and well-being with teachers, and that's something that really she amplified. So it's really refreshing to hear you as a school leader really making that in the forefront of some of the conversations you're having with your teams. One thing is, we've never named your band. Tell us about your band and where we can hear you, because I think that's important. You've been so humble. Go ahead, tell us. Who are you and where can we find you?
Okay, so the band is called FLARESTAR, and we're on all the big platforms, but we have a website. It's www.flarestar.ch, and it's all one word. And yeah, I mean, it's a flare star is actually, it's kind of like when a very far away kind of emits sporadic bursts of energy. So it looks like a flashing star. That's what a flare is. And
how did you come up with that, Matt? What brought that up?
We Stef, we went back and forth about a lot of things, then we kind of worked onto it, and we're like, it's gonna be this. And
yeah, we kind of looked at things, and then we kind of liked the idea of this unpredictable burst of energy. That's what we kind of liked, and we thought, being slightly older rock stars, that we are kind of unpredictable, and sometimes we can burst unpredictably, and it also kind of encompasses the kind of groove of the music as well. The music is very dynamic. It's I think if you could maybe say it's more of a sound, a wall of sound, a journey. It's not so much play a concert. It's not so much like you're going to go hear 12 songs. You get, when you come and see us, you sit down, and then you got an hour and a half of sound that comes at you, and it goes from samples to little folk songs to hard rock so it's really a journey, and that's what we wanted to encompass in the name, which is this sort of unpredictable burst of energy. And the music, that's how it happens. It kind of comes and it goes,
and it connects also with what you were both saying, is that your band, if you don't want to practice, you don't practice. There's no timetable. So I think it all comes together. Just want to remind our audience, in the show notes, Matt and Stefan have been very generous, and they've put their bio, but they put some books that they like, some music, and some resources. So please do scroll down to the show notes, and you can pick up on that. Stefan and Matt, if you were going to talk to somebody, a student or even a young adolescent or a young adult, why would they maybe want to consider becoming an international school educator? And I'll ask each one of you to kind of share that. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but you guys are on a roll here.
Matt?
Yeah, right. I have an answer for this, because it was one of the questions I think I was asked during my teaching interview to get on the PGCE, which I actually did excellent as well about 10 years ago. And one of the things I remember doing was I finished my PhD and I tried to find a job. And I wrote a bunch of different cover letters in different industries, so industry, finance, teaching, academia. And in the end, it was very easy for me to pick the teaching one. And one of the main reasons is because I felt like if I went to academia, which I was supposed to do, I could work in 6 labs around the world. And then I looked at teaching, and like, I can work anywhere. Like, everywhere needs a teacher. In the future, even when AI comes along, I mean, the discussions we've been having in school have made us even more convinced that we're going to need human educators in the face of AI. So with that, you are sort of building yourself into a necessary piece of humanity in the future. What a great idea. Anywhere in the world opens up to you. What a great idea.
Absolutely. I can't agree with you more. Stefan.
I'm not sure I follow that. That was epic.
That was pretty epic. Yeah. And no, and I think, you know, what I liked, Matt, was that you reminded us that this conversation about AI is only amplifying the importance of teachers and education, but maybe in a different approach. You know, I actually was talking to some educators, and then we were looking at ChatGPT, and they were like, "Oh, I'm going to be out of a job." I said, "You have to stop teaching to your past. You have to teach to the students present, and then you'll realize how important you are." That's my little moment. But Stefan, please.
Right. What can I say? I'm going to go against everything. No. I think what I would say to maybe someone that's looking into going to teaching is the fact that it's creating real connections, it's creating community, and it's creating co-creating with students that I think is finds very interesting. And I'm not going to lie, it's great environments to work in, great times to work in as well. And yeah, I don't know. Matt kind of blew it out of the water, so I don't know how to follow that.
Well, listen, both of you, thank you so much. It's just been such a rich conversation, and I think, you know, the uniqueness of having 3 generations of international school families, you know, just the thought that you're saying to your daughter, grandpa, you know, that how many of us remember that grandfathers were international school educators, and it's a testament to the whole system around the world and all the educators and people that founded these schools. I mean, we owe them so much. And just want to remind our audience, www.flarestar.ch. I follow them on Spotify, and who knows, they might be at the local festival this summer, wherever you might be. But Stefan, Matt, thank you so much for sharing your passion and your music with us. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you.
Very much.